All right. So first of all, thank you everybody for coming, and thank you so much for hosting me. I'm a big fan of Windsor. I come here a lot, and I enjoy this place. And it's a pleasure to be talking to Bitcoiners here. I've written two books, the Bitcoin Standard and the Fiat Standard. Both books discuss Bitcoin and Fiat and the relationship between the two of them. If I were to summarize the ideas in the books, and this is what I'm going to try and do right now, I suspect most of you seem to be pretty familiar with Bitcoin. I don't think we have a lot of noobs, so I don't know, maybe I'm going to be a little bit more I don't think I want to be very introductory in this, right? You're kind of familiar with the main ideas. So perhaps, yeah, feel free to interrupt at any point with any questions. We make it an open discussion, so we can talk about anything you guys feel like talking about. The basic idea of the Bitcoin Standard is that money has always been a struggle for figuring out, has always been a competition between different things. And what ends up being chosen as money ends up usually being the thing that is the hardest to produce. In other words, the thing whose supply can be increased with the least ease. Anything that is easy to make and increase in quantities ends up being produced in large quantities, so its value declines and they end up with a large stock of it and very little value stored in it. Whereas things that can be produced at quantities that don't increase easily, that can't be increased easily, they hold on to their value well. And so over time, whatever is the hardest to produce ends up being used as money. And historically, that was gold, which is the metal that is the hardest to produce. So because its supply doesn't get consumed, historically, we just keep producing gold and we keep adding it onto all of the existing stockpiles of gold, and it doesn't get consumed, it doesn't get eaten, it doesn't rust, it doesn't burn, it doesn't evaporate. So we're just stockpiling more and more gold. So annual production every year is a tiny little addition to the existing stockpile, which means that it's very hard for anybody to go and massively increase the supply of gold that is available on the market. And so over time, people who put their wealth in gold end up faring better on the long term than people who put their wealth in other things. And so historically, this is why we see that the whole world was, by the end of the 19th century, on a gold standard. Because anybody who used anything else as money was watching the value that they put in that just basically disappear. So everybody who was using other things as money just became poor, and only thing that was used as money was gold. So this is kind of the history, and we see, and in the Bitcoin Standard I explain this with many different stories for different other kinds of money and how they lost to gold. So seashells and glass beads and silver. And then we see the same thing happen with government monies. Within government monies, we see when you have a government money whose supply gets increased very quickly, the value of the currency declines very quickly. Whereas the harder currencies are the ones that hold on to their value the most and grow. So, all over the world, people adopt the US dollar and the euro and the Swiss franc and these reserve currencies rather than their local currencies, because their local currencies are being inflated at a supply of like 20, 30, 40% per year or more. Whereas here it's usually lower, although, we're catching up in the developed world now. Everywhere is approaching hyperinflationary numbers of money supply increase. So, which is really what the next thing the Bitcoin Standard discusses. When we apply the same framework to looking at national currencies, we see that the stronger ones win, the harder ones are winning, but we see that they're not hard at all, and they're all getting easier over time. And over time, they continue to make more and more of them. And I think this is why Bitcoin is such an important idea at this point, because it's the exact opposite of what everybody has been subjected to for the past century. For the past century, everywhere in the world, you've been denied the chance to save in a form of money that can hold on to its value. Everybody in the world has not had has not had their family being able to save money conveniently for the past century. We've all had that taken away from us. Wherever you are from, maybe the Swiss were the last who maintained that up until the 1970s. They were on the gold standard. But everybody in the last 50 years, and everybody but the Swiss for the last 100 years or so, has not been able to save money, because every time you try and save money, the value of the money is continuously being taken away from you by the government that can print more and more of that money. So we see the impact on that, and that's what the middle part of the Bitcoin Standard discusses. The impact of that on society is people can't save, so people can't think of the long term. People focus on the short term. And so you see this reflected in all kinds of aspects of human decision making. You see it in architecture, you see it in family planning. People just don't care about their families much. And you see it in all kinds of ways in which our decision making becomes more and more short-termist with everything that we do. And I think that's inextricably linked to the fact that our money is easy. In other words, historically, all throughout human history, humans are moving toward the harder and harder money. We continue to find things that are harder to produce, and we store our wealth in them, and that allows us to save more. And then when we save more, we start becoming more secure about the future. The future becomes less uncertain, and so therefore, because the future is less uncertain, we start becoming more future-oriented. And so saving is essential for us as human beings to be human. It's essential for us to have a future perspective. It's essential for us to not be animalistic and not just be completely controlled by our impulses. The difference between us and animals, they just follow their instinct and they do what they want. We're able to defer gratification, delay enjoyment, and to curb our instincts and instead follow our rational mind, which thinks of the long term. So you don't just follow every urge that you get, because you can think of the long term. And a big part of our ability to train for the long term and to prioritize the long term is our ability to provide for it financially. If we can save for the future, if we can put money aside and know that we can get it, we can access it in 10 years and we can use it in 10 years, that's going to make us much more future-oriented in our actions than if we cannot. So over the last century, we've lost the ability to save, and we've lost our future orientation. We've become more and more present-oriented, and that's one aspect of it. And then the other aspect is, because where did all of that wealth that was taken away from our savings go? It didn't just leak into the atmosphere of Earth. Somebody took it. Somebody took all of the value and all of that money of all of the people of the 20th century and all those families who were destroyed by inflation. That's where government funding comes from. All of the ruined families over the last century, that's what finances your government's budget all over the world. So on the one hand, we're taking away from people the ability to provide for themselves. And on the other hand, you're giving them a government that has effectively unlimited resources until it destroys the currency. Until it destroys the currency, it can continue to print money. And then when it destroys the currency, it has no ability to finance itself. So then that leads to complete collapse of the economy and the lives of everybody dependent on the government. But until then, that government can just continue to spend. So what else do we see in the 20th century? We see the growth of government power. We see the growth of government spending, the growth of government control over people's lives, and just the normalization of totalitarianism, the normalization of the idea that your government should be telling you what to eat and what to drink and when, how you get born, where you get born. All of your major expenses in life need to be provided by monopoly providers because they have a money printer. So, why should we have a free market in anything when the government can just print money and give us all of those things for free? Sounds like a nice idea, except when you try those nice free things, you realize they're not very nice. Everything that's free is worth exactly what you pay for. In fact, if you've learned anything from the internet and from Facebook, it's that when something is free, you are the product. You are not the consumer. And the same is true for all of the free things that your government gives you. You're not the beneficiary. You're the one who pays for it, because half of your money in taxes and in inflation. And really, I think there's a good argument to be made that in universal health care and in government provided care and in all of these interventions that governments do in healthcare, they are effectively, they're not giving you healthcare for free. They're using you as a product to provide for the pharmaceutical companies. In which case, in other words, they're using your tax money to force you to take treatments that profit the companies, and you're being told to be grateful because you're getting free medicine, but you're paying for people to sell you things that you don't want. So all of that, you can't separate that from the fact that you're up against people that have a money printer. That's really what it comes down to. The reason they can pull off this thing is because they have a money printer. The reason that makes all of these work, all of this scam only works because one party can essentially annul reality whenever it wants by just printing money. So you make something stupid that nobody wants to buy, doesn't matter. Print money and force everybody to buy it. So all economic reality gets distorted because of this. And all of that because of the fact that our money is broken. So Bitcoin comes in and allows us to fix this because it is a form of money that is not broken, that is not leaking. It's not made to be inflated. Nobody can make more of it. It's a money that is not optimized for criminals to rob you, which is revolutionary. I mean, it's just, it's an insane thing, because if you've lived in the 20th century, you think that's the point of money. The point of money is you hold it, so you put your value in it, so that criminals can then print more of it and spend it and finance it on themselves and their cronies. Well, this one doesn't have the ability for anybody to print it. So you've just taken down all of the downsides of money, all of the problems that come with money, all the negative user experience come from the fact that somebody can print your money. Everything else about money is an irrelevant detail. If somebody else can print it, that's gonna suck. So, that's kind of like a car that doesn't have an engine. If your money is gonna be, or that has a leaky engine, or that has an explosive engine, it's just, if you take that part of the car experience, the self-exploding engine, then cars become much better, right? And this is kind of what we're doing with money here. We take out this one little aspect of money, which is somebody prints more of it and then impoverishes you and sells your children into slavery in order to finance their stupid spending for them and their cronies. Imagine figuring out an app that just takes that out of money. And that's what Bitcoin does. So everything else about Bitcoin is really, think about it as just a functional detail of how to make that thing work. The really powerful thing about it is that we just don't have a mechanism for anybody to print more. That's it. And that's why it's such a big deal, and that's why somebody like me, who's usually very, very tech hostile and will take the longest time to adopt new technology, and will go and try and read and understand about what Bitcoin is relatively early, because it's extremely interesting and extremely captivating intellectually, because it offers us the idea that we can make a money that can't be printed. So if we have a money that can't be printed, I mean, if this thing works, it's going to be, I think, maybe the most beneficial thing to happen to humanity since the printing press, because everyone in the world right now can save for the future if Bitcoin works, which is an enormous, enormous thing, because everybody in the world now cannot save properly. It's very difficult to be able to provide for the future. 100 years ago, it was very easy. 100 years ago, you got paid in a gold coin. You went and you worked a job and you got paid in a gold coin or a silver coin, and you put it under your mattress and you waited a day or a year or 10 years, and you knew that at the end of that time, that coin still maintained its value. So everybody could save. Everybody could think of the future. And the world was much better when people were future oriented. Then you take that away from us by adding that feature to money where others get to print it. And we have a century of death and destruction and war and totalitarianism. And now Bitcoin is taking that feature away. It's offering anybody in the world the ability to get out of that, opt out of that. So I think the point that I try and make with my book, and I think the reason that my book was successful, is because it situates Bitcoin within that context. I've given all of this discussion about Bitcoin without even discussing anything about how Bitcoin works yet, or all of the technical details of how it works. It's more about the why. Once you get that why, then you see why it is worth it to get into all of these extremely arcane and difficult technical details about how Bitcoin works. It's not because we enjoy all of this obscure terminology and using all of these QR codes or these addresses. Nobody uses Bitcoin for the kind of user experience. It's not the iPhone of money where it's just gonna blow your mind with how different it is from the alternatives because it's just so smooth and slick. It's, as I like to call it, it's like an ugly contraption, but it does the job. It's not pretty. It's not the toy that you want. It's the medicine that you need. It's the bitter medicine that you need to take. It's not the toy that you want. You think, oh well, I would like this to be, the revolution that makes credit cards. It's the iPhone of credit cards. It's going to change money. It's not the iPhone of credit cards. It's the bitter medicine that gets rid of parasites. It doesn't taste well, and it's going to make you puke, and it's going to make you spend several days in the bathroom suffering, going through the turmoil of the bull market and and the bear market of Bitcoin. And it's it's convulsive, it's painful, but it's better than being stuck with parasites for the rest of your life, and you're going to take it because you want to be rid of the parasites. So the case for Bitcoin, the case that I make for Bitcoin is not a, hey, come, this is beautiful and this is great and it's all rainbows and unicorns and it's going to be beautiful. Nope. This is ugly, but it's much better than your current reality. Your current reality is, you're living with gigantic amounts of parasites sucking your life energy out of you, and Bitcoin is the only thing that fixes it. So suck it up and down your medicine. So that's kind of my case for Bitcoin.